we all have the same feelings. So like if you're feeling sad or you're feeling like nervous or whatever, like I have felt that in a different way. And so I think the tough part about mental health is like everyone's like, oh, like I'm the only one who's like feeling like this, so like I can't talk to anyone about it, versus like when you talk in a group, like everyone's had so many experiences that are so similar. So I think that that's why we try our best to like position mental health as more of like not just like a negative thing, just like kind of like the human experience is mental health, is life. And so for us, like that's been powerful.
My name is Romeo. I'm a sophomore and a peer counselor. Can you please start by telling us about yourself and what inspired you to do the work that you do?
Definitely. Thank you for having me. My name's Payman, and I'm one of the co-founders of a brand called Mad Happy that we started about 6 years ago, really focused on optimism and creating conversation around mental health. And I graduated from Beverly in 2012.
So you're an alumni here. Can you tell us what high school was like for you?
Yeah, high school was amazing for me, honestly. So I grew up, I actually was born in Italy, and then I moved to LA when I was 6. So I started in first grade at Rodeo. So I went there K through 8 and then came here. So it felt very like natural and easy to like make the transition, and I had friends and all that stuff. So I loved it. Sports, I played basketball here. That was like a big part, I think, of my like education and childhood. And academically, I thought the school was great, amazing teachers, and I love my experience.
Mm-hmm. So what, if anything, supported your time as a student here?
I guess at the time, I think on the topic of mental health, I don't know if it was like something I was even like really conscious of. So I think for me, it was just like a lot of like sports helping me and learning lessons of like the ups and downs of that. School to me came pretty naturally. So like I was like generally good at school. So it wasn't anything that was ever like a huge problem for me. But I think just like any high school kid, there's just like ups and downs, whether like socially or whatever. But I think it was just through my friends, through my parents, great teachers, stuff like that, great coaches. Jarvis Turner, who I think is still the basketball coach today, very big influence on me. So,
So what does Mad Happy mean?
Yeah, good question. So one of my partners, who actually had been my friend for like 10 years at the time, Mason, thought of the name. He actually was my first friend that I ever spoke about mental health with. He struggled his whole life. He never knew his biological dad and just dealt with like a lot of like childhood problems that of course made a big impact on him. And he dealt with a lot of ups and downs in his life, and he had dropped out of college and was trying to figure out what to do next. And he sort of thought of this name Mad Happy in a low moment for him of like trying to embrace like the downs that come in everyone's life and try to be optimistic in those moments. So that's what it meant to us at the time, and I think it's grown much beyond that now, and people have like their own interpretation of what it means, which we think is great.
Can you tell us what your motto, Feel Together, means?
Yeah, that's a newer thing for us. I think we want the brand to like bring people together, of course, and I think it's like sort of a two-sided meaning. One side is like feeling together, like we can all here like share our experiences, talk about things, but then also internally yourself, like feeling like you're one person, you feel like confident in who you are and what you can do. And I think that double-sided meaning of it is very similar to like Mad Happy.
Hi, my name is Nyla Paniker. I'm a senior and a Norman Aid peer counselor. So this month is Norman Aid's Resilience Month. How do you define resilience?
Good question. So I think like it's an interesting thing because like I was saying before, like my first like real experiences in my life, I think the hard thing early on in my life was like I moved to a new country, moved to LA, like didn't speak English when I was 6. I was very young, so I was like very lucky to like start in first grade and like learn English quickly and all that stuff. But I feel like from very early on, like resilience was a little bit like built into me just because of like the hardships that sometimes come with moving, and like it was hard for my parents and all that sort of stuff. So I think the theme of like trying to continue to push forward even though there's hard things that happen in our life has always been inside of me. And then I think throughout my life I've just had good experiences where it's like tested that, whether it's like with high school sports or college or what I'm going to do after college or within our company now, the ups and downs that come with any startup. So resilience is like one of those things that's just like built over time, you know, and you build confidence in yourself of knowing that you can get back up and that you can keep going.
Yeah, and I kind of relate to your response because for me, as I mentioned, I was new to Beverly this year and I'm a senior. So I came without any of my friends. My dad and my other family still lives on the East Coast and I'm from the DC area. So for me coming here, I had to be resilient because I didn't know anybody and I had to kind of put myself out there to make new friends. So I definitely think that we relate on that standpoint. So my next question is, what supported you during challenging times and how has that contributed to how resilient you are today?
Yeah, I think on the thing you just brought up, I also think that, you know, everyone's experiences are like more similar than we think, you know, even, not in terms of like, oh, you moved here from DC, I moved here from somewhere else, but really like we all have the same feelings. So like if you're feeling sad or you're feeling like nervous or whatever, like I have felt that in a different way. And so I think the tough part about mental health is like everyone's like, oh, like I'm the only one who's like feeling like this, so like I can't talk to anyone about it. Versus like when you talk in a group, like everyone's had so many experiences that are so similar. So I think that that's why we try our best to like position mental health as more of like not just like a negative thing, just like kind of like the human experience is mental health is life. And so for us, like that's been powerful. For challenges that have come up in my life, I think like I was saying before, mental health wasn't even something that I ever thought of like growing up, and I guess whether fortunately or unfortunately, but I think like as I went through school and graduated, and you know, I thought that I wanted to go into finance. I got this great job in New York, and actually a couple months in, I got pretty sick. Like I got like mono-like symptoms, like, you know, like I'm sure everyone knows that those sort of symptoms. And it was like the first time in my life I was like, oh, I don't know what's going on. I actually ended up moving home. So that was like the first like real like failure, you could say, at least to me at the time, of like, wow, like I just moved to New York, like I got sick, I don't know what's wrong. And then I came home, and over those next few months it was like challenging because I was like trying to think like, what am I going to do next? But like I wasn't sure if like I was going to be okay or whatever. And I think of course like it was all good. It just took a few months, and through that, I think that experience of like dealing with something really hard, and I think I was lucky, like I was 22, and that was like the first time I actually remember like feeling that way. That taught me a lot, and I think I had the support of my friends, my family, my brother, and then through that I learned, oh, okay, cool. So there's, you know, at the same time we ended up starting Mad Happy, which is so crazy. Like if I hadn't moved back, we would have never started the brand. So it's like one of those things that just like you don't know how life will like work out, and it definitely did in that way for me.
And so my next thing is, are you comfortable sharing a personal experience that helped you to build your own resilience while you were in high school?
Yeah, good question. So in 8th grade, actually, like I was skiing like winter break, and I went off of this like crazy jump, and I landed on my back and actually broke my hip skiing. And this was like, it was in Mammoth, and like there was actually no flights in and out of Mammoth at the time. They flew me on this like small like emergency plane to LA, and I got surgery. And so like I got like screws and all this stuff in my hip. I was like in a wheelchair for like 2 months at school in 8th grade. And then thankfully like I fully recovered, but I actually didn't like make the basketball team my freshman year because like I only had like, I don't know, a month or two of like getting back into it, and I just like wasn't there. I think like that moment was of course like a very low moment for me at the time. Like thinking back, like it's not like I'm like still sad about it, but it's just funny to think like how low I felt at that time. But two, I think it was like a good test for me early on in high school of just like dealing with something that's like negative, at least in my mind, and then having to like come back from that and of course like play basketball the other 3 years at Beverly. So so that's one that I would say was like super challenging. And I think for me, like, you know, like the concept of like failure and stuff like that, like there weren't many other opportunities that like I had to like succeed or fail in my life before that. Like I said, like I was pretty good in school, so that was like the first one that I'll always remember.
Oh, okay, I wasn't expecting that answer at all. That's a very unique story. Okay, so this month is National Mental Health Awareness Month. Can you share why you think it's important to bring awareness to mental health?
Yeah, well, I think just like for us and for everyone, I think like mental health has become like this word. It's like so weird, and everyone's like, oh, we can't talk about it. And I think like that's the issue. So like we also try to like be careful of being like, oh, like it's this month, so like we can only talk about it this month, or like we need to talk about it this month. It's like, you know, if we're talking about like physical health or going to work out or all this stuff, like we're not saying like, oh, like this month, guys, like we're talking about like physical health, you know? And so I think the more just like mental health can become a part of like daily conversation, even like the good times, right? It's like having a good day and a bad day, all of that is like your mental health together, right? Not just the bad stuff. And so I think the more we could paint it in this like positive light of like, how do we all just like feel better, but know that like there's going to be times where we don't feel great, but like we'll be fine, and we'll be able to get through that together, and as a person individually. Like that's why we talk about it so much.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I love Norman Aid, because Norman Aid helps facilitate the mental health discussions that we have at school. So it makes it not a monthly thing, it makes it an everyday thing throughout the school year. So that's why I really love the resources that we have here. So we're currently preparing for our finals, which are going to be coming up in the upcoming weeks, which I'm sure you can remember how stressful that was. What advice would you give students to take care of themselves and their mental health during busy times like finals?
Yeah, I think finals, you know, it's like one of those like stressful times or whatever, twice a year time where like everyone's like, oh my God, like all this stuff is going on. I think that for me, I always thought about it as just like, in the moment I was like, oh, like I want to get all A's, like whatever. Like I was like super ambitious like as a student, but I remember like one of my teachers was just like, yeah, like 10 years from now, like you're actually like not going to remember like what you got in this class or on this specific test. And so I think like being able to zoom out a little, which is hard. It was really hard for me when I was like 16 or 17 to do that. I think is so true. You know, like so many things end up not going your way in life. But if you think like a year from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now, like, will that really matter? Probably not. But then in the moment, I think it's just like about knowing like the work you have to do to feel prepared for it. And that's really all you can do. You can't control how hard the test is going to be. You can't control what you end up getting, besides just like how hard you study for it, how much you plan it out, those sorts of things. And if you do that, then that's all that matters, in my opinion.
Right, and I'm sure those skills that you gained at Beverly about your finals, I'm sure you carry that into college and beyond. So thank you for that advice. And my final question is there anything else that you would like to discuss or share with our listeners?
I think the last thing is just like this, you know, we were talking about it before we started recording. I think like there's, you know, this side of mental health that everyone's just like, oh, like why would we talk about it? It's so negative. And then there's this other side which is like, let's just pretend that like everything's always good, and like then, you know, that stuff doesn't matter. And I think like the more like we're not on those extremes, the more we're just like, oh, this is just like what life is about, and it's okay if we talk about this stuff. It's okay if we still are positive or optimistic even in down times. Like that's just like a better way for like each person to live, and then all of us to live together. So that's like the advice I would give, the advice I always give.
Why do you think that the topics and surrounding mental health discussions have been more prevalent in the more recent years? Do you think that there's anything that specifically has contributed to that?
Well, I would say a lot has contributed to it. I think one is just like time, you know. I think like you know, in like the 50s and 60s, like people weren't even talking about like physical health, right? It was just like so many people were getting like heart disease, all this stuff, and then they were like, okay, how do we treat it now, right? And then like that went through like a movement of like people running and all this stuff, and companies like Nike contributed and all these amazing things that happened. But I think then it went to a time where it was like preventative, right? So how do we do things for our physical health that like actually allow us to not ever get those diseases or not ever be in those situations? I think mental health is going through something similar. You know, I think it was like mental health 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, was just like, oh, it's like, just like, oh, that depressed friend you have, or oh, this person who has this like issue. Now it's like, oh no, like, you know, there's mindfulness. Oh, there's like, you know, taking time off. There's, you know, talking to your friends, all this stuff. And I think things, of course, like COVID, things like the media talking about it more, celebrities talking about it more, brands talking about it more, all this stuff is like just helping push the movement forward that like was always going to start at some point and just maybe was sped up over the last few years.
We would like to thank our generous sponsors and partners, Michael J. LeBeau, Norman Aid Peer Counselors, KBEV, and of course, we'd like to thank our listeners. Stay safe and make today well lived.